Jake shivered as he huddled under the thin blanket in the alley behind Sunset Boulevard. At 19, he had been homeless for over a year in Los Angeles, struggling to survive day by day after his mother's death and his stepfather's subsequent eviction notice. The harsh realities of street life wore him down. The constant search for food, the fear of violence, and the crushing loneliness that seemed to follow him like a shadow. Every morning, Jake would wake up stiff and sore from sleeping on the hard concrete, his body aching from the cold that seeped into his bones despite the relatively mild California climate. He'd gather his few possessions, a worn backpack containing a change of clothes, a toothbrush, and his mother's photograph, and set out to scrounge for food and maybe earn a few dollars. Some days, he'd stand on street corners with a cardboard sign, enduring judgmental stares from passers-by who avoided eye contact. Other times, he'd search through dumpsters behind restaurants in West Hollywood, grateful for any scraps he could find. The nights were the hardest. Jake would curl up in doorways or under bridges, always on alert for danger that lurked in the darkness. He'd seen other homeless youth beaten and robbed for the little they had, their cries for help echoing through the urban canyons of downtown LA. The police were no help. They'd chase Jake away from tourist areas or threaten him with tickets he couldn't pay, treating his existence as a nuisance rather than a tragedy. Despite his circumstances, Jake maintained a certain dignity. He would wash up in public restrooms, keeping himself as clean as possible, and visit the local community center when he could to shower properly. He developed a routine of sorts, finding the safest places to sleep and the most reliable sources of food. The staff at a small coffee shop on Wilshire sometimes slipped him leftover sandwiches at closing time, small acts of kindness that kept his faith in humanity alive. Jake hadn't always been homeless. He'd been a promising student in high school with dreams of college and a career in business. His mother had worked 2 jobs to support them after his father left when Jake was just 7. When cancer took her during his senior year, everything fell apart. His stepfather, resentful of the burden, gave Jake 30 days to find somewhere else to live. With no family to turn to and no money for college, Jake found himself on the streets, his dreams seemingly as distant as the stars above the light-polluted Los Angeles sky. The city's homeless population had exploded in recent years, and resources were stretched thin. Jake had tried the shelters, but they were often full, dangerous, or had strict curfews that made it impossible for him to work odd jobs. He'd applied for assistance programs, but waiting lists were long, and without a permanent address or phone, follow-up was nearly impossible. The system seemed designed to keep people like him trapped in poverty, a cruel cycle he couldn't break. Despite it all, Jake clung to hope. He'd managed to hold on to his high school diploma, keeping it protected in a plastic sleeve in his backpack. He visited the public library whenever possible, using the computers to search for jobs and reading books to escape his reality. Education had always been his refuge, a way to transport himself beyond his circumstances. Little did he know, this habit would soon become the foundation of his transformation. One particularly difficult evening, after being chased from his usual sleeping spot by security guards, Jake found himself wandering through downtown LA, hungry and exhausted. Rain had started to fall, a rare occurrence that turned the city streets slick and unwelcoming. As he passed a small electronics store, a television in the window caught his eye. The screen showed Warren Buffett speaking at a shareholders meeting. Something about the elderly billionaire's straightforward wisdom made Jake pause, sheltering from the rain as he watched. "The best investment you can make," Buffett was saying, "is in yourself." The words echoed in Jake's mind as he continued his search for shelter, unaware that this chance encounter would soon change everything. One chilly afternoon in February, Jake ducked into the Central Library downtown to warm up and escape a sudden downpour. The grand building, with its Egyptian-inspired architecture, had become something of a sanctuary for him over the past months. As he browsed the computers in the media section, a recommended video on YouTube caught his eye. Warren Buffett's top 5 pieces of advice for young people. Remembering the television clip from weeks before, Jake clicked play, curious about what the billionaire investor might have to say. For the next 10 minutes, Jake was transfixed by Buffett's folksy wisdom and straightforward advice. The Oracle of Omaha spoke about compound interest, living below your means, and the importance of integrity. But it was Buffett's emphasis on continuous learning that resonated most deeply with Jake. Read 500 pages every day. That's how knowledge works. It builds up, like compound interest, Buffett advised. Jake had always been bright. He'd maintained a 3.8 GPA despite his mother's illness. But poverty and family issues had derailed his education. Now, a spark of inspiration flickered to life in his mind. Over the next weeks, Jake became a fixture at the library, arriving when the doors opened and leaving only when forced to at closing time. He devoured every video, article, and book he could find about Warren Buffett and his investment philosophy. The librarians began to recognize him, occasionally pointing out new business books they thought might interest him. One of them, Ms. Rodriguez, even brought him a sandwich sometimes, concerned about the thin young man who studied with such intensity. As Jake immersed himself in Buffett's world, one book kept coming up repeatedly in interviews and articles. The Intelligent Investor by Benjamin Graham, Buffett's mentor at Columbia University. Buffett called it by far the best book about investing ever written, and credited it with shaping his entire investment approach. Jake searched the library catalog, disappointed to find all copies were checked out with a waiting list. Something told him this book was important, perhaps even life-changing. Determined to read Graham's work, Jake spent days doing odd jobs around Venice Beach, washing windows, helping tourists with directions, and even assisting a street vendor set up his stall each morning. Each dollar he earned went into a small pouch he kept hidden in his shoe. After 2 weeks of scrimping and saving, often going with just one meal a day, he had scraped together enough cash to buy a used paperback copy from a bookstore in Pasadena. The store owner, noticing Jake's worn clothes and eager expression, threw in a notebook and pen for free. That night, huddled under a streetlight in a quiet corner of Grand Park, Jake began to read The Intelligent Investor. The book's opening lines seemed to speak directly to him. This book is written for investors, not speculators. Graham went on to explain the difference. Investors sought safety of principal and adequate return, while speculators chased quick profits. Jake read until his eyes burned from strain, and the park security guard kindly but firmly told him the park was closing. As he walked to his sleeping spot that night, clutching the book to his chest, Jake felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Purpose. The following days established a new routine. Jake would wake early, wash up in a public restroom, and head to a quiet corner of Pershing Square where he could read undisturbed. He rationed his time with the book, wanting to absorb every concept fully. When he encountered terms he didn't understand, P/E ratios, intrinsic value, margin of safety, he would note them down and research them during his library visits. Ms. Rodriguez noticed his interest and recommended additional resources, impressed by his dedication despite his obvious hardship. Jake's appearance began to change subtly as his mind expanded with new knowledge. He stood straighter, spoke more confidently, and his eyes reflected a clarity of purpose that hadn't been there before. He managed to get a temporary job distributing flyers for a local business, which provided enough money for food and allowed him to continue his financial education. At night, he would review his notes by the light of public buildings, committing Graham's principles to memory. Investment is most intelligent when it is most businesslike, became his mantra, a reminder that emotion had no place in sound financial decisions. Little did Jake know that this philosophy would soon lift him from the streets to heights he could barely imagine. The Intelligent Investor was dense and challenging, filled with concepts that initially seemed impenetrable to Jake. The book's lessons on value investing, market fluctuations, and emotional discipline required multiple readings to fully grasp. Jake persevered through chapters on margin of safety and defensive investing, taking meticulous notes on scraps of paper he collected. He was particularly struck by Graham's Mr. Market analogy, the idea that the market was like a manic-depressive business partner who offered to buy or sell shares at wildly different prices depending on his mood. This concept helped Jake understand that market prices didn't always reflect true value, a revelation that would prove crucial to his future success. Inspired by Graham's teachings, Jake began to look at the world differently. Walking through the financial district of downtown LA, he no longer saw imposing buildings, but rather the headquarters of publicly traded companies whose financial statements he could analyze. He noticed inefficiencies and opportunities everywhere: a popular coffee chain expanding too quickly, a tech company whose products he saw everyone using despite its undervalued stock. Using free Wi-Fi at cafes and public libraries, he researched companies and studied financial statements, teaching himself to read balance sheets and income statements through free online courses. Jake's first investment opportunity came unexpectedly. While helping an elderly man carry groceries home from a market in Echo Park, Jake learned that his new acquaintance, Mr. Chen, had worked as an accountant for 40 years before retiring. Impressed by Jake's questions about investing, Mr. Chen offered him a deal. Jake could use Mr. Chen's address for mail and occasionally help with household chores in exchange for guidance with his financial education. This arrangement gave Jake something he desperately needed: a fixed address that allowed him to open a free checking account at a local credit union and eventually a brokerage account with a no-minimum online platform. Jake's first investment was tiny, just $27 in a low-cost index fund, opened with a free online broker that offered fractional shares. The amount represented nearly everything he had saved from odd jobs over 2 weeks, but following Graham and Buffett's principles, Jake understood the importance of starting the compounding process, no matter how small the initial sum. He added to his investment whenever possible, often choosing to go hungry or sleep in less safe locations to save an extra dollar or two. Each sacrifice felt meaningful now that it was tied to a greater purpose. Months passed as Jake continued his financial education while struggling to survive. He found a somewhat steady job washing dishes at a small restaurant in Koreatown, working late nights and sleeping during the day in parks or quiet corners of the city. The restaurant owner, Mrs. Park, sometimes let him sleep in the storage room on particularly cold nights, touched by his determination to improve his situation. Jake never mentioned his investments or financial studies, preferring to keep this precious part of his life private. His small account grew slowly but steadily, reinforcing his belief in Graham's principles. A breakthrough came when Jake discovered a free investment simulation game online. Using the knowledge he'd gained from The Intelligent Investor and subsequent research, he began to participate in virtual trading competitions. His conservative, value-based approach, focusing on companies with strong fundamentals trading below their intrinsic value, consistently outperformed more aggressive strategies. After winning a monthly competition hosted by a popular financial website, Jake received a congratulatory email inviting him to join an online investment forum for promising amateur analysts. The forum became Jake's classroom and community. Using computers at the library and free Wi-Fi spots around the city, he engaged in discussions with experienced investors, some of whom worked professionally in finance. Jake's insights were thoughtful and well-researched, informed by both Graham's teachings and his unique perspective as someone who observed consumer behavior from the streets. He developed a particular talent for identifying companies with durable competitive advantages, what Buffett called economic moats, that were temporarily undervalued due to short-term market concerns. By the one-year anniversary of finding The Intelligent Investor, Jake had transformed intellectually while his physical circumstances remained challenging. He still lacked stable housing, though he now occasionally stayed in hostels when his dishwashing job provided extra hours. His investment account had grown to nearly $500 through small, regular contributions and modest returns, a sum that would seem insignificant to most, but represented a lifeline of hope to Jake. His real wealth was in his knowledge and growing network of online connections who respected his investment acumen without knowing his circumstances. As Jake marked this personal milestone by rereading his now dog-eared copy of Graham's book, he couldn't know that his most significant opportunity was just around the corner. Jake's dedication to value investing principles began to pay off in unexpected ways. His knack for finding undervalued companies with strong fundamentals caught the attention of several respected members of the investment forum. One evening, while using the library computer before closing time, Jake posted a detailed analysis of a small manufacturing company that had been overlooked by most investors. The post meticulously broke down the company's balance sheet, competitive advantages, and why its current stock price represented a significant discount to its intrinsic value. The analysis, written in clear, accessible language that reflected Jake's self-taught expertise, quickly became one of the most discussed topics on the forum. 3 days later, Jake received a private message from a user named Value Hunter, who complimented his analysis and asked several probing follow-up questions. Their conversation continued over several weeks, with Jake impressing his mysterious correspondent with his thoughtful responses and deep understanding of value investing principles. What Jake didn't know was that Value Hunter was actually Michael Brennan, a partner at Westwood Capital, a boutique investment firm in Century City. Brennan had been lurking on the forum looking for fresh perspectives and had been consistently impressed by Jake's contributions. The pivotal moment came when Jake's analysis of the manufacturing company proved prescient. The firm announced a major new contract and share buyback program, causing its stock to jump 37% in a single day. Jake's forum post had preceded this move by just 3 weeks. The next day, Value Hunter sent Jake a message revealing his true identity and asking if they could meet to discuss a potential opportunity. Jake, still living on the streets and washing dishes at Mrs. Park's restaurant, was simultaneously elated and terrified. How could he possibly meet with an investment professional in his current state? With Mrs. Park's help, Jake cleaned up as best he could, borrowing a button-down shirt from her son and getting his first haircut in months. He arrived at the upscale coffee shop in Century City an hour early, nervous but determined not to let this opportunity slip away. When Michael Brennan arrived, he was surprised by Jake's youth and somewhat disheveled appearance, but was quickly reminded why he'd reached out as Jake began to speak about markets and investment philosophy with remarkable clarity and insight. By the end of their 2-hour conversation, Brennan had offered Jake an internship at Westwood Capital with a modest stipend that would allow him to find stable housing. Jake's transition from homelessness to the professional world wasn't seamless. He initially lived in a youth hostel in Koreatown, saving most of his internship stipend while learning to navigate office politics and professional expectations. Some of his colleagues at Westwood Capital were initially skeptical of the young man with no college degree or formal training, but Jake's work ethic and analytical abilities quickly silenced doubters. He arrived earlier and stayed later than anyone else, absorbing everything he could about the investment business, while continuing to apply Graham and Buffett's principles to his research. What might have been a disadvantage, Jake's lack of formal education, became an unexpected asset. Unburdened by conventional financial theories that had led many firms astray, Jake approached investment problems with fresh eyes and practical wisdom. His background became an advantage in other ways too. Jake's street smarts and resilience set him apart in the competitive world of finance. He could spot consumer trends early by observing behaviors his colleagues missed from their office towers, and his experience of poverty gave him insight into companies that served lower-income markets, an area often overlooked by privileged analysts. Within 6 months, Jake had moved from intern to junior analyst with his own small portfolio to manage. His value-oriented approach consistently outperformed the market, attracting attention from senior partners. By the end of his first year at Westwood Capital, Jake had saved enough for a security deposit on a small studio apartment in Echo Park. The day he signed the lease, he sat alone on the floor of his empty apartment and wept, not just for the roof over his head, but for how far he had come from that rainy night when Warren Buffett's words had first caught his attention through a store window. Jake's rise continued as his investment acumen translated into real results for the firm's clients. He developed a specialty in identifying small and mid-sized companies with strong fundamentals that were temporarily undervalued due to market misconceptions or short-term thinking. By his second year, Jake was managing a significant portfolio and had been promoted twice. He invested his own growing income wisely, living well below his means just as Buffett advised, and watching his personal investments compound. When a profile of Westwood Capital in a financial magazine highlighted the remarkable young analyst with an uncanny ability to spot value, Jake's reputation spread beyond the firm. By age 25, just 6 years after finding himself homeless on the streets of Los Angeles, Jake's net worth crossed the $1 million mark, a milestone that seemed impossible during those dark nights in back alleys and under bridges. Jake never forgot where he came from. As his wealth and influence grew, he became increasingly aware of the systemic issues that created and perpetuated homelessness in America. During a particularly successful quarter at Westwood Capital, where his value investing strategy had significantly outperformed market benchmarks, Jake approached the firm's partners with a proposal. He wanted to establish a foundation focused specifically on homeless youth, providing not just shelter and food, but education in financial literacy and investment principles. The partners, impressed by both his professional success and personal journey, agreed to provide initial funding and connections to other potential donors. The Intelligent Future Foundation, named in homage to the book that changed Jake's life, opened its first center near downtown Los Angeles, not far from the library where Jake had discovered Graham's work. The foundation offered a comprehensive approach to helping homeless youth, providing immediate needs like safe housing and healthcare while also focusing on education, mentorship, and practical skills development. Jake insisted that financial literacy be a core component of the program, believing that understanding money management was crucial to breaking the cycle of poverty. The foundation's innovative approach quickly gained attention from city officials and social service organizations, impressed by its holistic methodology. Jake's story of perseverance became widely known after a profile in the Wall Street Journal detailed his journey from homelessness to the financial success. The article, titled "The Value Investor Who Started with Nothing," chronicled Jake's discovery of the intelligent investor and how Graham's principles had guided his rise from the streets to managing millions in assets. The piece went viral, resonating with readers across the country who were inspired by his determination and the transformative power of education. In interviews that followed, Jake always credited Graham's book and Buffett's advice for changing his life, emphasizing that knowledge, not luck, had been the foundation of his success. As the foundation expanded to other cities, Jake developed a curriculum based on his own experience, teaching homeless youth about saving, investing, and building wealth through patient, value-oriented approaches. He recruited volunteers from the financial industry to serve as mentors, creating pathways to internships and jobs for program participants. The foundation's results were remarkable. Within 3 years, over 70% of participants had stable housing and employment, with many pursuing further education or training in financial services. Jake's approach challenged conventional wisdom about homelessness, demonstrating that with the right support and education, even those in the most difficult circumstances could achieve financial stability and independence. Jake's professional success continued to grow alongside his philanthropic work. By age 30, he had been promoted to partner at Westwood Capital and had launched a specialized fund focused on long-term value investments in overlooked sectors. The fund consistently outperformed market averages, attracting attention from institutional investors impressed by both its returns and its manager's unusual background. Jake maintained his modest lifestyle despite his growing wealth, still driving the same used car he had purchased after his first year at the firm, and living in a comfortable but unpretentious apartment. True to the principles he had learned from Buffett, he saw extravagance as an unnecessary distraction from what really mattered: compound growth and meaningful impact. On the 5th anniversary of the Intelligent Future Foundation, Jake organized a special event at the Central Library in downtown Los Angeles. The gathering brought together foundation graduates, financial industry leaders, and social service professionals to celebrate the program's success and launch an expanded initiative. During his speech, Jake unveiled a surprise announcement: a new scholarship program that would provide full college funding for homeless youth interested in business and finance. The program would be funded by a significant portion of Jake's personal wealth, which he had committed to philanthropy following Buffett's example of giving back to society. The event featured a special guest who had traveled from Omaha specifically to meet Jake. Warren Buffett himself. The legendary investor had heard about Jake's story and been moved by how his advice and Graham's teachings had transformed a young man's life. Their conversation, which took place before an audience of foundation participants, covered investing principles, the importance of mentorship, and the responsibility that comes with financial success. Buffett praised Jake's foundation, noting that investing in human potential yields the highest returns of all. For Jake, having his hero acknowledge his work represented a full-circle moment that validated his journey from homeless teen to millionaire philanthropist. As Jake looked out at the audience that evening, seeing the faces of young people who reminded him so much of himself just a few years earlier, he felt a profound sense of purpose. These weren't just program participants, they were future investors, entrepreneurs, and change-makers who simply needed the same chance he had been given. The dog-eared copy of The Intelligent Investor that had traveled with him from park benches to shelter doorways now sat in a glass case in the Foundation's headquarters, a testament to the power of knowledge and perseverance. Jake's journey from a homeless teen to a millionaire investor was more than a success story. It was a blueprint for others, proof that with determination, the right knowledge, and a commitment to timeless principles, anyone could overcome tremendous odds. As he concluded his speech that night, Jake shared the same advice that had changed his life on that rainy evening years ago. The best investment you can make is in yourself. In the faces of those nodding in agreement, he saw the next chapter of his legacy beginning to unfold. Jake's story reminds us that within every struggle lies the seed of an equal or greater opportunity. It shows us that our circumstances don't define our potential, but rather our response to those circumstances shapes our destiny. In a world that often seems unfair, Jake's journey from homelessness to success proves that with perseverance, education, and a helping hand, anyone can rewrite their story. His tale isn't just about financial success, it's about the transformative power of knowledge, the importance of giving back, and the incredible resilience of the human spirit. May we all find the courage to pick up our own intelligent investor, whatever form it may take, and use it to change not just our lives, but the lives of others around us. If Jake's story touched your heart or inspired you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. How has a book or a piece of advice changed your life? Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories of triumph over adversity and practical wisdom for success in life and finance. Thank you for being part of this journey. Your support means the world to us and helps spread these important messages of hope and empowerment.